Okay, we're live.
Hi, welcome to the final event in this fall's Tabula Poetica reading series. My name is Anna Leahy, and I direct both Tabula Poetica, the Center for Poetry at Chapman University, and the MFA in Creative Writing program. We've been hosting events entirely online this season with live streaming on YouTube. You can also find an array of video recordings of previous events from previous seasons and from this season on the Tabula Poetica YouTube channel. And Tab Journal is on Facebook and Twitter if you want to follow us on social media. Most of the support for the reading series and for Tab Journal comes from the English department, and this year also from a university faculty opportunity funding grant. Tabula Poetica received grants from poets and writers to support our visiting poets this year as well. I especially want to thank English Department Chair Joanna Levin for ongoing support, and also Administrative Assistant Samantha Della O, who has done an amazing job handling the behind-the-scenes logistics while we're all working remotely. Graduate Assistant Jason Thornberry has also made my job way easier this semester. Tonight, we feature faculty and students in the MFA program. This is our poetry party instead of our final exam. As is our tradition for these MFA readings, each poet will name the next reader so that I won't interrupt the flow of the poetry. That said, I want to briefly say something about the faculty and staff who are reading this evening. My colleague, Genevieve Kaplan, has been this year's guest curator, and I am really, really grateful for the good work she's done here. Her new book, Aviary, was published by Valise Books. David Kraussman is an alum of our MFA program and is now the graduate programs coordinator for Wilkinson College, which houses the MFA in Creative Writing program. He's the person who shepherds our students from their application all the way through to their commencement. My colleague Brian Glazer is a vital part of our poetry community, and his latest book, I think, he's published several lately, I think is All the Hills. And then there's my amazing colleague, Mildred Lewis, who's a playwright, a poet, and so much more. I'm excited to announce publicly for the first time that Mildred Lewis has agreed to curate Tabula Poetica for next year. We're going to begin the poetry tonight with Genevieve Kaplan, this year's series curator.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure curating the Tabula Poetica series this fall. We've brought some great poets, Michelle Britton Rosado, Angela Pena-Redondo, and Brent Armendinger to Chapman University and the internet this year. I think one of the silver linings of being safer at home this semester is that we've been able to invite all of you to participate with us. If you missed any of these readings or craft talks, of course, you can access them on our Tabula Poetica YouTube page anytime. Tonight's final event in the series, as Anna said, features students, staff, and faculty from Chapman University. And I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight and to get to showcase these fine and inventive writers. So it's my job to kick off the evening with the reading, and I have a few poems to share. I will read 3 poems from my new book, Aviary, that Anna mentioned, and then a couple newer poems. The birds had taken over. And that was enough pleasant talk. A chirp there, a peck, and a scattering of seed. And they get smarter by the hour, defined by the sun and the shadow, the leaves that appear on the dead-looking tree, the breeze that flicks the branches, the setting sun, the at last unforeseen black wing of the bird searching under the elevated joint of the railing, the angle of the earth. That is summer, is spring, is one moment left, one dream world in slanted shade, one swipe of light in the eyes, one place for birds to assemble, to trim the branches. An upset of the flock and a new one settles, talks back, is a clear day or a sign that evens out, an assertion from the next mile over. The birds are prone to jostling and feed extravagantly. Cage, tree cage. The light-headedness of those darting beneath the tree cage, the quail rustling, the jutting, the yellow leaf to signal the beginning of the turning, the motion about to arrive. I read this. I sat in the shadow. Here is love. In the street, beneath the tree, upon the sidewalk, in the arms, in the branches, between the clouds, in the shade, in the morning, against the curtain, below the sunlight, against the flowers, across the lawn, among the blue pincushions, the biting lilies, the stranded screen, against the rock wall, in the awning, beneath the draperies, in the meadow, against the river, in the dust there, in the earth, among the daylight, the ivied leaves, within the boundaries, up the driveway, after the culvert, under the shelving, in the garden, circled by scenery, in the sunlight, in the breeze, under the blue spruce, against the fan palm, in the grove, adrift in safety, wrapped by end lines for an occasion, inside the park, beyond the entrance in the clearing, in the dry river, below the hawk bleat, on the road, in the density, in the coming upon it, in the woodland, in the garden, in the cleared land, among the policies of the soil, in the reclaiming by the water, beyond the watchers, in the care by the entrance, in the thick of it, beneath bare branches, in the leaves, adjoining the causeway, in the lighting, in the spyglass, in the sanity, in the asking, along the road, in the coming, in the distance, in the observed, near the maple, beside the sunlight, in the strewn leaves, among the animals, in the night sounds, in the leaving by the open field, in the asking, in the description, in the enclosure, by the deed. Whew, that one takes the breath out of me every time. This next poem is a newer poem, and it was just published in the End of the World issue of the online journal Mariah, which is published by Woodbury University, which I recommend checking it out. There's lots of great stuff to read there. Mariah is the name of the journal. Sometimes a note gets lost. In a pocket or other fold of fabric, it goes in the wash, finds itself well rubbed, or not yet written, only thought. So the words were never set, were always set. I kept them and listened. The ear just pricks a bit. You can't hear the difference with your ears turned inward. No one can hear, say, there's been a slice taken from my rib cage. There's a motive missing from my heart. My spine doesn't work to hold my shoulders anymore. Loss is like that. And this next poem is one that I wrote early on during our pandemic year. And even though it's not really about COVID, I feel like it really captures the kind of unreal dreamscape that I find myself so often feeling like I'm living in. I offer some guidelines. I pull out the pins and offer to put them down. All night, I dream about telling others what to do, and we are crowding each other out. In the same room, I ask them to sit in chairs at tables I'd arranged, and there they are, all on the couch in a loose line. I give instructions. I locate the letter T and find the sound of it rattles, and pressing my tongue against tooth is soothing. Before sleep, I am so very aware that thinking about my own self is a metaphorical act. When I close my eyes, there is a darkness. When I open them, I look at the world and am able to think beyond vision, to imagine what else could also be happening. And finally, I think this is a more hopeful poem and a fitting place to end my section of the reading. Show love to polar bears and earn 1,000 points. The difference between you and everybody else, or one and everyone else, is maybe very slight. Everyone knows what a cat is. Everyone knows what a child is. Everyone knows what a prank is. Everyone knows a rose. Within this almost formulaic impression of the softened everyday, I had a misunderstanding with myself. What was seen and what was touched, and which items meant something different when set by the sea. What from the island was given an advantage? What about ants? I want for the cups, the plates, to outlast me. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next reader, David Kraussman.
Thank you, Genevieve. Those were beautiful. I have 3 poems to share this afternoon. I had to double check that I wasn't muted just now. The first of which is called Emergence, and I wrote this when I was in the program. Emergence. In college, I had a writing professor who taught us to never use the word suddenly. Suddenly, needlessly past time, already passing. Things don't happen suddenly. It was a beautiful day. Suddenly, he called. It was a beautiful day. He called. How do we know the state in which he called? Why is the call itself sudden? I feel the compulsion to use the word. How do we know the state in which he called? He was out of breath. Why is the call itself sudden? I don't get calls from my father, and any call when there are no calls is sudden. Or maybe unexpected. Years with 2 languages, but 2 languages like whiskey and scotch. I don't know the difference between whiskey and scotch. I just know there is one, kind of know when to use which, know not to blend them. Sweet potatoes and yams, I'm even less confident with those. Every kind of cut of meat is meat to me. When the call becomes the call, it's sudden. Time is passed needlessly, it sure is. Mom's recipe for sweet potatoes is being digitized into a family cookbook PDF, dotted with shakes, pinches, and the cooking time until it's done. She says she'll email it to me when she's done to edit. She never emails it to me. She finishes it. I don't ask for it. We don't speak that kind of language together. I text her asking what goes in the cranberry relish. Half an apple and a whole orange, or half an orange and a whole apple? She responds with orange, whole. No, apple. My next poem is called The Tell-All. My nephew is writing his memoir, his 4-month-years-old tell-all. I am waiting with bated breath. Tio, he tells me, you will not believe what my dad tried to feed me the other day. And my mom, don't even get me started. I encourage him endlessly, slipping $20 bills into his onesies to help him when times are tough. When his mom says his next bottle isn't for another hour and a half, to help see him through the long, hard life he's had. I was there when this all began, I tell him. I still have the parking structure ticket on my dashboard when his mom and those mean women up and yanked him from his perfect contentment and his dad would not stop holding him. When his perfect world was turned inside out and the outside was him and the inside gone. I have seen so much, my 4-month nephew tells me, and I am so tired all the time. You have, I say to him, kissing him on the forehead, smelling the impossibly soft wisps of hair on my nose so light it's like there is nothing but an auburn halo. I'm going to tell it all, he says. You will, I say, before my sister comes, asking us what we're talking about. And my last poem is called New Year's Day at the Cemetery. Happy birthday, Laylee. Someone's beat us here. 4 mylar balloons wag, 2 stunning grand bouquets, a small banner of bright pink triangles wrapped around your headstone, an always appreciated cigarette. We bring more flowers. The flower base is happy but challenged to accept. Cake, candles, but the wind does not want to cooperate. The cemetery is busy, families stretched out with loved ones, big seated parties around headstones, fold-out chairs, crinkling sandwich papers stepped on, kept from flying away, a cooler of beer. 2 twin boys and their sister run just over the hill, laughing and Dad not far behind. Aunt Yakuta tells Evan to grab a cigarette from her purse, and he does. We don't know how we feel about him grabbing a cigarette for her. He knows what it looks like. We can't argue. Together, we clean, arrange flowers, sprinkle water, lay more flowers, and talk. Some about the new Star Wars movie, some about Mom's big-heartedness. As we're readying to leave, the wind decides to allow our small birthday cake a chance, dulling just long enough for Aunt Yakuta's lighter to spark, as well as our small, lime green kitchen lighter. Candles light, we sing, Evan blows out the candles, and after a few minutes, more talking, kissing the balloons, which seem so intent to pull everything with them, we dig in, just for a taste at first, with careful fingers, just tasting, until whole candles are used for utensils, taking full, satisfying bites. And that's it for me. Thank you all for your snaps, and I have the great pleasure of introducing the next reader, Vesper North.
Thank you, David. You were fantastic. All right, I have 3 poems. The first one was inspired by the work of Rotimi Fanai Coyote, who is the photographer who's featured at the Begin Again exhibit here at Chapman, the Escalate Collection. This one is De Pontour. My body, a fountain, flesh, repulsive. Marble skin soft as silk, disfigured. Salon vonom and hatred si Lord. Drop the veil over my spirit, clinging to me, suffocating me. Mud slapped on my soul, hidden from the world. Blind eyes everywhere, avoiding what disgusts. Fixated, can't ever tear away. Mon amour ni disperte jamais. This next one is Enough is Enough. The threshold to the subterranean, home to the ill elements, passageway to filth, a trove of grot and gash, nothing soft survives here. Cold yet reflective, open to anything, keeping nothing, save mere traces of sweetness. What once had value is now broken down into remnants, diluted. You dish out convoluted sentiments to mask and muddle intention, and your offerings run right through. And the last one, Crash, is actually based on the Vogue Crash diet, which I'm sure someone probably saw on Twitter at some point or another. It's not all that healthy. 1 egg, soft, ungarnished, ping-ponging cross bone, chased by a river of cafe noir and into a grumbling stomach below. Brittle strands knot in the bristles, clothes hang from a shallow frame. Yellow teeth greet the mirror. Degotee, she finds contentment all the same. Now, 2 for lunch, washed down by more wine. Chablis will do. To be starved is divine. Such porcelain can cut by a shallow word. Punishment comes, avec du doigt. It does not matter what you are. Lastly, 5 ounces of dripping red flesh, si vivant si mort, coated in cracked pepper and lemon so sour. It passes between emaciated lips. Don't forget to kill that bottle throughout the hour. In the evening, she retires with an amuse-bouche of salted cheeks, a steady stream to touch the tongue, filling herself on espoir et rêve, till morning when she can do it all again. And now I have the pleasure of passing it on to Sam Rizak.
Thank you so much, Vesper. I'm going to be reading a few poems tonight, a little Florida inspired, the first of which is anaphrastic, and it's inspired by a billboard in my hometown that's sort of like a town joke. It just says, an eternity in hell is a long time. It's been vandalized before and it just keeps getting fixed. It's a staple. So, an eternity in hell is a long time, promises the billboard on Highway 486, the road to the produce stand, where owners taught me how to tell a melon is ripe. Shake and listen for seeds rattled loose inside. A magic 8-ball method of fortune telling I brought back to the elementary school lawn, where classmates and I would take flights with sprints down a hill. Desperate to feel our feet leave the ground, we cast maracas out of honeydew and cantaloupe and spun, our bodies the loose seeds of a watermelon, no longer attached to the flesh of this town. And when I think of Florida, I think of family. So this next one is called, My Father Says It's Been a Week Since He Last Had a Drink. Born inside a flower bed, I tucked my roots beneath my feet, fragile bristles worn down by drought, overgrown with weeds of let-me-downs, too faint for much breath, sometimes a whisper against my calf, a bug, I think, and swipe, only to find absence in full bloom. Oh. And to move from a father poem to a mother poem, the next one is inspired by the goddess Demeter and sort of her relationship with her daughter Persephone, who she loses for half of the year. So it's called, You're Lucky, Demeter, When You Grieve. Skies mourn, gray soil steals to stone, trees lament leaves, all to feed a split open womb, peach with the pit removed, your loss a feast. I wish I could make the world starve too. And now for my final poem, I'm gonna go to an aspect of Florida that most people are pretty familiar with. It's called The Florida Man. So, The Florida Man. Did you hear the one, they ask, when I say where I'm from, about the Florida man who threw, wrestled, urinated on the alligator at that drive-through mall gas station lawn, gave a whole new meaning to hit and run when he zigzagged a path right into the cop ranger neighborhood watch I pick up, the one with the gun and maybe a badge. Oh, he kills, will do anything to flash his lights and turn black into blue. Boy could be hands on his head, asphalt in his mouth, and still he'd be too high for this Florida man who's gone helicopter level out of his mind. A single gasp on his radar, enough reason to pull the trigger on a face he's got pinned, fixed flat to the ground. No, they say when I ask, they haven't heard that one. I'm not surprised. Not one for headlines, nonetheless, he's a Florida man, born and raised. Thank you, everyone. And up next, I am very honored to introduce my friend and classmate, Trofina Yeboa.
Thank you, Sam. Those were beautiful poems. I'll be reading one prose poem that I wrote about my friend who isn't doing too well, and it's called Pulse. Ours is not an impoverished relationship, the roots of a thing resisting growth. What we are is a sprouting field, a greenness that ripens fast and extends a hope we cannot live without. Which is why the second I hear about the malfunction, accident that your brain has turned against itself, that you're twitching, your body having lost all control, jolting an electric madness through you. My heart, it burns. My heart, it gives way, falls free from its anchor and shoots right up into my throat. A lump trapped inside, an abnormal growth of a cell. Take a day, any day, where the body, without warning, contorts itself into a crisis. The urgency with which it spreads, the manner in which it breaks the flesh that holds it. Take a day, any day, where the night before your friend talks and laughs like it is the most normal thing, the most precious thing. And before you know it, you're waking up to a life that is naked and exposed, so fragile you're sent to your knees gathering what is left of it. I witnessed the breaking down. My friend, a drip hooked to her vein, its thread strangling me at the neck. My friend losing her speech, the hitch in her voice creating a void that can swallow me whole. My friend taking out her braids, preparing her scalp for wires to record wave patterns. I go under and under, drowning where no one sees. The friend of my heart on a bed, a table inside a tube-shaped machine, my God, a nightmare, an emergency, the body as a frightening complexity, and my friend laboring in breath while the condition splits her open. She inhales and it's a gift. She exhales and it's a promise. Take a day, any day where everything is predictable, where you lift a cup to your lips and eat of something sweet, honey on your tongue, waters of milk flowing about you on all sides. Days you are so at ease you escape the memory of pain, where life is so full, so long, you take your time living it. Now what you imagine, give to me tenderly, for I am desperate for something to believe. Thank you. Our next reader is the wonderful Ariel Banayan. Thank you.
Thank you, Trofina, and all the other readers. I'm so happy to be here virtually and with everybody. And I hope one day I can see everyone and shake their hands and we can all get COVID haircuts. And I'm reading two poems. The first poem is it's actually the first poem I wrote in the program. I came to Chapman not wanting to ever write a lick of poetry ever again, which all changed when I worked with Carolyn Forche and the rest of the community and staff here at Chapman. And it's a bit of a downer, sorry, but it's titled Broken Grass. It was over the phone when my mother told me, hoping I should know the news once the pain had slowly eased, and the funeral, no longer recalled as a simple funeral, was simply a memory of her passing. Murals of my mother's cousin conjured in me as I sat calmly in my car, still scared that the engine might say I'm burning too much gasoline. My mother said it was the kidneys that failed, overworked in every sense of the word. She's not suffering anymore, I told her, gripping one hand on the steering wheel tighter than what I had planned. I was told the babysitter could not make it at the last minute, and the burial was a loud display of flowers curling like note pages burnt off a journal. Black was forbidden in the attire, so her passing would not fall as bleak, but with bright color. I eventually saw the photo of her son at the funeral. He just turned 2 years old. He sat so the broken ground was soft grass. tender like the parks we'd all ease along on the weekend for the Persian New Year, celebrating spring in Hafez. He was smiling on that cemetery lawn, unaware that something was missing and why he was held so often. At the news, I nearly drove on the wrong side of the freeway, as if that was my own plan. Never in my life do I want to hear that sound again, of a mother mourning for her child. The prayers in temple were interrupted by that cry. Even as the rabbi called up each speaker, a loud and late echo rang back and around the overfilled room, lingering with dark and bright colors pouring from the stained glass of Esther and Moses. I lost track when her yells overpowered the last speaker, and I saw her daughter's still photo. We left the temple with tears on our shirts, stained from wet hugs by her sister, nieces, mother, and husband. Outside, my mother spat on the sidewalk of Los Angeles. She asked us all the same question. Didn't we remove the stitches on wounds received in Iran? I stepped over her spit, the concrete hard on my shoes, and stared up at Wilshire Boulevard's tall buildings and ads, its lights spilling concrete into my eyes and skull cap. All right, and then the second poem, it's not a downer, it's more about hope, I think. It's called I Heard the Crash. I heard the crash of the washing machine break as my clothes still wallowed in its stale waters, half drowning with barely an arm waving for help. They looked like gentle layers of skin, waiting to spin off any trace of tension and dirt, and within the wrinkles, memories deep as scars. I suddenly felt the need to be clothed in this past, let it sear the body blood red with heat, until I let a drop of water wander from the face to the arch of my neck and further down my shoulder and back as I laugh at that crashing sound, the ridiculous feeling of being held captive by some unthinking machine. When was the last time I felt this release? The same loss of tension as Dante following the movement of a stream through a hole in bedrock, a sound not known by sight, leading him and Virgil and all that infernal air out from the anus of hell, clearing the soot of pain and smeared ash from eyes wearied by all that suffering, just to once again witness the stars at night. Thank you. Our next reader is the amazing Sarah Valadez.
Aw, thank you. That was some beautiful poetry, bro. I really liked it. So I'm actually just reading 3 tonight. I don't have a bunch, but I'm pretty proud of them. So this is Here I Am. Wishing for sweetness and something a little kind. It goes out to the silence. The fragrance that surrounds my dreams is nothing like the tang of silver linings. What was nice and bright turned, and when it turned, it blossomed. It grew into fine little jewels. My life was stolen, perhaps even sold, but no one ever said these jewels didn't have teeth and that sweet dreams didn't sting. Next is my poem, How Smooth. Small, like the walking fish, I could fit you in my palms, she said. So smooth, like a slug, poisonous with fear that I wouldn't catch you. He listened like a child. He focused on every particle and atom within range and her center. You may cry and hate, and that is fine, she smiled. He drew a tangerine sigh in her father's fruit trees. He stepped away because he knew she wouldn't lie. The scales and mucus on his palm, and her voice dangling like a ripe pear. They will both age with no bones, no secrets, no stutters, and no more sunshine in their hair. My last poem for tonight is called Backwards. I actually had a lot of fun with this one. It resembles nothing the original does, but yeah, I'm pretty proud of this one, so here we go. World, the order and that, still is their content. Be I can how, rest can I be how, window through drifts, sore orange mocking, and scent of scent and, Fools, of fools made were we, see you do? Antagonisms, hatred, tired I am, selves old into the split, then and mounts of then, one fused in eternal sound, always pursuing, answers losing, question hear I, tonight in my mind, oh, that? Union of premise, humiliating the low, always escape that cry of paralyzed bodies, of fools, fools and I, sealing my mouth, mouth sealing, long cries. Sex I hate as hate them I. Yard lights, flowers, this is it. You tell I tell the moon, I tell you. My, I can't describe. And that's all my poetry for tonight. The next person we have is Kimberly Bocut, and she's an amazing poet and author. You guys are going to love her. So give her a big welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad I had you first introduce me. Thanks. That's a lot to live up to. My first poem is called Rubens, Goya, and Molechek, and it's based on two paintings, Saturn Devouring His Son, 1820 to 23 by Francisco Goya, and Saturn Devouring a Son, 1626 to 1638 by Peter Paul Rubens. My art teacher, Mr. Molechek, the one with the missing front tooth, the unbuttoned shirt, he has no appreciation for Rubens with that fat baby's back, hands too hesitant, peeling the wan cadmium flesh, a chiaroscuro black. I knew I would mess that up. Okay. Goya, he says, is Prussian blue, held taut over plastered walls, saturated in black oil, still wet. Goya is fleshed, stretched across bones, with no give, slashed bare, and nowhere to hide. A dark gash where his tooth should be. Mr. Molechek, eyes glazed, thinks of a son lost to the shadows. All right. And this is my last one I'm going to do. It's called Bare Shelves. There is an aluminum can shortage right now. I fear that soon there will be no more devil water, wasteful indulgence, addiction that is going to kill you. Diet Coke is the pop fizz of a can opening up on a sleep-in summer morning and a slice of chocolate cake for breakfast. Grandma, aunts, mom sit on the porch, bare feet dangling. My sisters and I stay still so they won't notice us, listening as they laugh about things we shouldn't know yet. Now, old enough to know better, my kids in the back, I pull into the Carl's Jr. drive-thru after soccer practice. My son says, "You're addicted, Mom." No, I'm not. I could stop anytime. You can't stop, Mom. I could, I just don't want to. I probably shouldn't tell him that. It's not the Diet Coke I am addicted to, although the sound of a can popping makes my shoulders relax, and sometimes I think about the ice and the bubbles and the perfect size straws. Not that. I am addicted to my sister, mother, grandma, aunt, and irreverent belly laughs, tears that dry up as quickly as they are shed. I miss them sometimes 3 times a day, often more. One more conversation with my mom. Crystal Cove Beach, sunset, blankets around our shoulders. We talk about fear as the Alzheimer's slowly steals her away from me. She tells me it will be okay if I get angry with her when she is crazy and hard to handle. The light fades from the sky as we talk about the pieces of her life that are going dark. We hold hands. About these things I don't want to know. I can endure global pandemic, righteous riots, biblical fires, distance learning, but an aluminum can shortage, this thing that brings empty shelves to the Diet Coke aisle, this perhaps will be more than I can bear. Thank you. And so I want to introduce Dr. Brian Glaser and look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Kim. If I could, I just wanted to echo some of the words, some of the poetry we've heard tonight before reading my poem. Defined by the sun and the shadow, in the sanity, in the asking, suddenly he called, and the inside gone, cold yet reflective, desperate to feel, absence in full bloom, a greenness that ripens fast. My heart, it gives way. She exhales and it's a promise, hoping I should know the news. He was smiling and something a little kind. Rest can I be how? And nowhere to hide. Blankets around our shoulders. Thank you for your poems. My poem is called Beginner's Mind, and it's dedicated to Countee Cullen. It's got 15 parts to it, but they're brief parts. 1, there are 31 ways of seeing. If you trust me, you are complete. 2, Adorno on jazz. As my teacher might say, what a strange expression, deal breaker. Thelonious Monk's America, who has forgotten as long as this? 3, what an idiot, Ward Churchill. What a dumb thing he said, comparing bankers to Eichmann. What bankers do to people, people do to people. 4, pointing the finger, walking the dog, not minding the rain. 5, I used to love that poem, Heritage, by Countee Cullen. You can tell he really doesn't know what it means to be Black. I really got that part. 6, Phyllis Wheatley treated poetry like a game, the child genius. White people know nothing. Black people know nothing's nothing. 7, her name was Lorraine Embry. I always knew there wasn't, though I expected love. 8, before you were a beginner, you were someone. Flesh and blood, your biographer says. We were then, you and I, strong as ice. 9, incident, more shameful than menstruation to the other. So there you said the word we can't understand. 10, you were Phi Beta Kappa too. Teachers want blood, blown blood, back in the body. 11, I won't read your novel. I'm just not into dissociation. If that's all you know about me, that's enough. Orange Moon. 12, beginners understand greatness. Only adults think it has to do with death. That's boring. Greatness has to do with love. 13, but what if I say something crazy? That you're great in a Harlem window, the closet of imagination. 14, rumors, critical thinking, about to begin, forever. 15, something must be said for sadness. On the couch with my son, memory of that sadness is joy. And the next reader is my esteemed colleague, Mildred Lewis.
Brian, thank you so much. Brian once wrote a poem for me, and it's one of the things I treasure most in the world. I'm going to be reading 3 poems. I'm not as pithy as I should be, but I hope you enjoy. Passionate Denunciation, a response to the Guyanese poet Martin Carter. Beloved, the dark times are already here. The season for play is done. Nuzzling danger has wrought disaster, evil demands its reckoning. The dead refuse burial. Their ashes rise to choke us, their secrets are poison, their lies are our lies, and toxic. Our footsteps sink into fetid quagmires, unable to find purchase. We stumble past our best impulses. When a mirage of safety is reached, we learn that there are thin, unbreachable wires beneath the surface, razor sharp and rusted. When we try to cross them, they rise to gash and slit our souls, leaving abscesses to fill, drain, then fill again. Bloodied, we crawl into our silos. Inside them, we cannot speak honestly about the streaked blood on the carpet. Pain flogs us into silence. There, impotent fears rise within us, insatiable, refusing to be relieved by tears or sacrifice. They leave our visages corroded and abrade our empathy. The fragility of our understanding of danger, the inability to cope with the tsunami of violence, the slow, quiet seeping of blood into pavement, an intubated chest gasping for air like a fish flung from water. We lift up badly damaged love, dented light, and smoldering holy fire and trembling hands, knowing full well it might not be enough. The second poem is The Laying On of Hands, and it's a poem for Heather Heyer, who was, of course, killed in Charlottesville. A lust for the crush of fiberglass against flesh, the satisfying rumble bum of a body underneath tire, the meshing of blood, bone, and shards so different than strange fruit swinging loose and free. Cleaner than the corpse dragged behind horses, bits of its flesh tangling into brambles, berries now nourished by blood, cloth scraps binding themselves to barbed wire. An overwhelming desire to feel, probe, penetrate, pare to bone the hated body, an invitation that cannot be refused. Fist caresses cheek, knee connects to groin in a mockery of passion, bullet greets innards. We circle each other in endless rite, knit together by touch, longed for and feared. Our dance, antediluvian and Martin, profane, sacred, deadly. The last poem, What Shall We Do? What shall we do with our very justifiable rage? Drop it into a glass of icy seltzer, like a sour salted plum, and stir it vigorously, letting it clank against the glass until it dissolves into manageable threads that can be touched delicately with the tip of the tongue. Or should we throw it in with the endive, then toss it tumultuously with other dark green bitter things, enjoying its sharp smell and the lingering taste of tamed pepper? I prefer to send mine off with the early mist of a perfect morning, where it can leave no trace, freeing itself and freeing me. That's all. Thank you so much. And the leader guide, at one time all things poetry, but now she has birthed a whole generation of poets, Anna Leahy.
Thank you, Mildred. Oh, I am so grateful to be part of this community. I'm going to read 3 poems, and then I'll probably have a concluding remark. The first poem I'll read is called Signs of Dehydration, and it's at a poetry project called SWIM, SWWIM.org. And I wrote this a few years ago during one of the many now fire seasons. It has an epigraph from CNN, and the epigraph reads, "A sobering message for Southern California after a week of raging wildfires. This is your new normal." And it struck me that this poem also has echoes for pandemic times. Signs of dehydration. The only thought, water. Rising tides, the boats lifted, water, water everywhere. The lips crack as if kissed too much, as if leaving the mouth dry. Heat is a game. You're getting warmer, you're burning up. Weakness in the knees of the flesh in the moment. Early leafing, early blooming. How will the bees know the when of their lives? The body reshaped too easily, the back of the hand unable to feel its form. Loss of ice and snow, the world uncapped by thaw. Inability to eliminate waste when there's something soluble left to give. Swimming acidity by the tons, oceans moving toward neutral. The heart races, the blood's sluggish. Wind means fire, rain means flood, the weather becomes wild. Loss of salt in the wound, worth ones. Everything depends upon the smallest pinch, a grain. More frequent and violent extremes, abrupt from the Latin to break away or steep. Slowing, confusion, the world spinning, fever the world over, earth in stupor, sleep, or extreme dozing off, or sleep that cannot reverse itself. The next poem I will read was published in Gravel several years ago, and I was trying to look for something lighter or happier. The end, I think, veers away from that, but I had a fun time writing this poem. None of that. A friend, a fellow poet, announces he will someday open a restaurant called None of That, wanting customers to say, "Oh, I'll have none of that." And by that, he means cheese. What confidence! I see now, only years later, its acronym, NOT. I am jealous of his utter disdain. I am jealous of his unwavering voice. What would I not serve? What would I not allow on my menu? All I can think is beets, but who likes beets? They would not be missed. No, I long to loathe what others likely love and to be okay with that loathing. But I am poor at decisions. Insouciance is an illusion. I desire to deny others based on my own predilections, the strength of my convictions, whether right or wrong. But I find myself lacking, full of wishy-washy sympathy that, though I don't much like, what is it? Mint, trigger of my migraines, I see how others might. I have seen the thick tongue licking mint chocolate chip from a cone, have heard talk of julep, a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. This friend will not stop. He claims that his second restaurant will be called None of That Either. He has more than I can muster, and I try harder to think of something, the thing, but all I want to keep from others is what I most want for myself, because there might not be enough to go around. And the last poem that I will read is my newest publication. It is in the latest issue of Poetry Magazine, and it's also available online now at the Poetry Foundation. It's called World of Glass. Birds do not look much like leaves until fluttering leaves look to me like birds, because feathering is metaphor. Shearings are slivers trimmed from glass, and shearlings are sheep just shorn. The meaning is in the action, not in the thing itself. It's the throwing of the stone. The chip makes a waster or cullet something flawed, returned to potential so different than flight. To leaf is to layer in gold. Pages are leafed through, and feather meant flying before it became pen, just as glass was sand before it was glass. Sheets can be paper, or they can be glass. And I can be glass, can glass over, and plume is the shape of smoke, of birds, as if etched on air. When the atmosphere cracks, glass is said to weep. No fleece, no feather or leaf, no view through the fire and glaze. Flame work gives shape to sand. Birds take their leave. So that is our last Tabula Poetica of the fall. I want to thank all the readers. What I really like about this MFA poetry reading, which we've been doing at the end of the semester instead of a final exam for years now, is that I get to hear a variety of different voices. And I've said this before at these readings, there's a criticism of MFA programs that students tend to produce McPoem, that they all tend to write more and more like each other. And what I find, and this evening is evidence of that, is that instead, when we come into a community and talk about our poems and write our poems and read each other, read our poems to each other, we understand our own voices better, and we actually end up with more distinctive voices. And I think we heard that tonight, and I want to thank each and every reader who participated. I think that's it for tonight. I wish we were all in person, because then we would traipse off and continue the discussion over food and drink. But hopefully that will happen in the new year. Until then, good night